Welcome back to Hoosier History, Legends, and Heroes. Most of the time, it seems like I take you back to the 1800s. In this video, we're not going back quite as far in Indiana history. We're going back to 1963, October 31st of 1963. I want to give everyone an idea of what was going on in that year. John F. Kennedy was the President of the United States. The world saw the beginning of Beatlemania. The Vietnam War was still raging. The first James Bond film was released starring Sean Connery and Dr. No. The Academy Awards in March of that year saw Lawrence of Arabia starring Peter O'Toole as Best Picture. Anne Bancroft won Best Actress for her role in The Miracle Worker, and Gregory Peck won Best Actor for his role in To Kill a Mockingbird. The #1 song for 1963 was Surfin' USA by the Beach Boys. And on November 21st, President Kennedy and the First Lady flew to Texas. On November 22nd, President Kennedy was assassinated in Dallas, Texas. Vice President Lyndon Johnson would be sworn in as president. Holiday on Ice was coming to the Indianapolis Coliseum at the State Fairgrounds. Opening night would be Halloween night, October 31st, and the ice show had performed in Fort Wayne earlier in the month. There were advertisements for the show in the newspapers. Kroger offered deals on tickets. Hook's Drug Stores offered 29-cent hot fudge pecan sundaes. Yummy. And to think Hook's was only charging 29 cents. Wow. They also advertised for vendors for the concession stands. Also in the papers, you were shown the acts that toured with Holiday on Ice that year. Evansville, Indiana's own pair skaters, Sarah Riken and Mac Cummins, Ray Ballmer, the Glamour-icers, and Hound Dog, the Little Pooch. This article was in the paper on opening day. It would say the presentation was described as a sphere of beauty. It talked about some of the acts that were in the show. Ice skating comedian Ted Dealey, the Williams family, and making her American debut, Hannah Eigel from Austria. Families would wake up that Thursday morning excited about the ice show that they would see that night. And what made it even better was knowing that they were going on opening night. The children had to get through school, and the adults had to go to work. I'm sure it seemed like the day just dragged on, but finally it would be time for everyone to get in their cars and head to the Coliseum. People came from all over the state: Danville, Columbus, Kokomo, Lafayette. They would enter the Coliseum full of excitement and anticipation for the ice show. Thousands of people would arrive that opening night, not knowing that 74 of them would never return home. The show was scheduled to begin at 8:30, but it started about 15 minutes late. But once it started, the audience experienced a beautiful show with chills, thrills, and laughs. Beautiful costumes and intricate choreography to show off the talent of the performers. They watched solo performances, pair skating, and group performances. The time for the grand finale finally arrived. The skaters had moved to the center of the ice, performing what is called the wheel. The other skaters were in the wings, waiting to take their final bow. It was now 11 minutes past 11. To the shock and horror of the ice skaters and the spectators sitting in and around the southeastern end of the arena was a terrific explosion. The blast lifted about 700 square feet of floor, sending debris and spectators towards the ice. Then, underneath the stands, a load-bearing wall would collapse, causing an additional cave-in of about 500 feet of flooring. Moments later, a second explosion happened that sent a fireball 40 feet in the air. Spectators who were able started evacuating. It was said that there wasn't a mass panic, most people being in shock. a firefighter who was in the audience immediately called the Indianapolis Fire Department. This call also alerted the Indianapolis Police Department. Ambulances were called for. The first policeman arrived within minutes, and additional police were sent to the scene. The first call in from the police stated that 10 to 15 people had been killed. Sadly, that number would prove to be very low. The Marion County coroner would arrive around 11:45. It is believed that 54 people were killed instantly. A temporary hospital was set up in a cattle barn. Because of the number of dead, the coroner would have the bodies placed on the ice and covered with blankets. Audience members stayed to help performers and staff tend to the injured and help free those who were trapped. Not only were the police and fire department there, but civil defense, the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, and scores of others used buses, ambulances, and private cars to take the injured to area hospitals. The explosion was covered on the late-night news, and by the next day there were headlines all over the country telling of the horrific explosion that happened in the Indianapolis Coliseum. I'm sure you can imagine that there are hundreds of survivor stories. I will share a few of them with you. Sandy, one of the skaters, told her story. She was in the wings, waiting to go on for the finale, when she heard a terrible bang, and she had no idea what caused it. Then she heard the second bang, and the principals and all the people backstage started running and screaming, "Get out of here!" When she reached the door, she met up with two other skaters, Bill and Isabel. The three would make their way outside and away from the Coliseum. Isabel had been part of the wheel, and she was hysterical. She would scream, "All those bodies came flying out on the ice! My God, all those people!" Sandy would say that all they could do was pray, and the three of them kneeled on the cement and prayed. Afterwards, Sandy and Bill would go back inside, and Sandy would say that the ice looked like a morgue. It was all covered with blood and bodies were lying all over the place. Sandy would tell the reporter that none of the skaters were hurt, except for a few scratches and bruises. Another spectator would say that he saw people jumping over the balconies to their deaths. A 20-year-old college student had taken his girlfriend to see the show. He had been able to drag her out from underneath the rubble. As they were making their way to safety, he would say that they saw arms and legs sticking out from underneath cement slabs. John, who was part of Holiday on Ice, would also say that no performers were hurt, but some had been knocked off their feet from the impact. He would say that fire and flame followed immediately. People ran onto the ice. They didn't know what to do. They were slipping on the ice. The people were just like cattle. They came across the ice and got out of there. Police Chief Robert Riley said, "This is indescribable. I thought I had seen death, but I guess I was wrong. I don't care if you have seen 5 wars." And then another survivor told his story. His family had left a little early, and he left his wife and young daughters in the vestibule as he went to get the car. He looked back and saw flames shooting through the window. He rushed back to find his family buried under a plywood partition. His wife and children did survive. One of the saddest stories that I read was given by a policeman. He had picked up a 3-year-old girl and was carrying her away from the carnage, and as she was crying out for her daddy, she would die. It just so happens the mayor of Indianapolis was in the audience that night. He would say that he had never seen anything like it, and that it's the worst tragedy in the history of Indianapolis. He would say that everyone was enjoying the show, and all of a sudden there was a terrific explosion, and bodies started flying onto the ice. Flames were shooting 25 to 30 feet into the air. Fumes started building up, and people were screaming and trying to get out. Another skater would share her story. She would say that she had heard a roar, and because it was raining outside, she thought the building had been struck by lightning, and she thought the roof was falling in. As she was rushing towards the curtains, she looked back and saw debris and bodies all over the ice. And now for my final story I'm about to share. It's about a 9-year-old girl who lost her parents, grandmother, and 14-year-old brother due to the explosion. Her 15-year-old brother did survive. She had been in the hospital in critical condition for weeks, and finally at Christmas she was taken off the critical list, and the doctors said that she would survive. The blast would end up killing 74 people. People of all ages, all walks of life. Parents, children, and siblings lost their lives that night. Approximately 400 were injured, and some of those permanently. The cause of the explosion was determined to be 5 gas tanks, each having the capacity of 100 pounds of propane. The tanks had been stored in an unventilated concession storeroom, which was unfortunately located directly under the south side mezzanine seats. One of the tanks had rusted, and it had a faulty valve from which the gas had leaked. The gas filled the unventilated storeroom. A manager would open the door and found that the room was full of gas. He then tried to evacuate employees, with one of the employees going back into the room, hoping to stop the leak. With the door open, the gas would escape the room and come into contact with a heating element on an electric popcorn warming machine and ignited, causing the blast. A few minutes later, the second explosion were the tanks that had not exploded in the first blast. The grand jury indicted 7 people. 5 were indicted for involuntary manslaughter. Misdemeanor charges went against the fire marshal and the fire chief. Even with indictments, no one served any jail time. Charges would be overturned and dropped. The only person to be found guilty was the president of Discount Gas Corporation. He was found guilty of assault and battery. I don't understand that one. And this would be overturned by the Indiana Supreme Court. More than 400 lawsuits were filed. $1.1 million went to 379 of the victims, and $3.5 million was paid in an out-of-court settlement. The Coliseum was closed for more than a month. Engineers would go in to make sure it was structurally sound. Holiday on Ice would return a year later and perform in the Coliseum. This is a current picture of the Coliseum today. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed learning about one of the worst tragedies in Indiana's history. Be sure to subscribe, like, share, and leave a comment. And be sure to click on the notification bell so that you will be notified when the next Who's Your History, Legends, and Heroes video is uploaded. Until next time.